Hey Amy, okay, so I want to show you that the homework questions that you're coming across are a little bit more difficult than the ones that you will see on the test, but I do want to go ahead and show you how you would solve some of those just out of curiosity's sake. Again, they're very, very similar, but a little bit more difficult. So I grabbed a couple of them from the homework and I'm going to write them down here. So one of them said something like this. If I have, say, 7w over 6 minus 3 is equal to 5w over 4. So kind of similar to the fraction ones that we finished class with on Monday. You would need to, for this one, it's a little bit different because I told you that I would give you all ones that could also be turned into decimals. But the other option was to find a common denominator. So what we would do on this one is find the common denominator between 6 and 4. So remember, that was a matter of trying to find the common multiple that they share. If we look at all the multiples of 6 and all the multiples of 4, the very first one that they would have in common would be 12. So what that means, we are going to multiply both sides of this equation by 12. So multiplying both sides would keep it equal. So what that means is we're going to, when we multiply that entire side there on the left, so this side right here, we have to distribute it to that 12 to each part of what's in the equation there. So 12 times 7w over 6 and then 12 times 3. So doing that in that case, when I take, just to rewrite this to show you what's happening, 12 times 7w over 6 is what we're doing first. Then what that does is we look across at this opposite numerator denominator, the 6 and the 12, and we ask ourselves what they can both be divided by. It will always be whatever that denominator is. So we'll be able to divide them both by 6. So what that means is, doing so, 6 divided by 6 would give us 1, which means that we can eliminate that denominator, and 12 divided by 6 would give us 2. So that means then we're simply left with, since this kind of cancels out, then we're left with just 2 times 7w, which is 14w. Now then we do the exact same thing, because remember we had to, I'm going to write that in blue again, we had to distribute the 12 times 3. We can even look at it as negative 3 because of the minus sign right there. So 12 times negative 3 would simply be negative 36. So we would just write that, and I'm going to write it next to the 14w down here, since I didn't have to write that one out. 12 times 3 we know is 36. So that would just be then minus 36. And then distributing that 12 to the last part down there at the end, on the other side of the equal sign, we'll do the same thing that we did with the 6 over here. Both 4 and 12 can both be divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 would be 1, so therefore that bottom will just cancel out. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. So then that means we're left with 3 times 5w, which is, and I'll just write it down here, which means that it's equal to 15w down on the other side. Okay, so let me clear out some of the stuff that we've done and show you what I'm left with then. So I'm left with 14w minus 36 is equal to 15w. So what I'm going to do is I want to get w just to one side of the equation since we have it on 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take that smaller one. So I want to leave the number, over on its own. So I'm going to subtract this 14w so that it cancels out over here, and subtract the 14w over here. Over here, again, it cancels out, leaving me with just negative 36. And then over here, it'll leave me with just 15 minus 14 is 1. So that's the same thing as just w. So therefore, w is equal to 36. So that's how we would do the ones on the homework. Just, again, for curiosity's sake. And I'll show you another one, too. But again, don't forget that the ones on the quiz won't be quite like that. So I grabbed another one just to show you, again, it's still very, very similar. If I have 2v minus 9 over 7 plus, 2v, yeah, it is 2v, I'm sorry. The other one is 9v plus 2 over 2 is equal to 38. So once again, I'm going to have to do the exact same thing, because I have those denominators down there. I want to get rid of them, so I'm going to multiply by a common denominator. Out of 7 and 2, the common denominator would be 14, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 14. Even though over on the right side I only have the number 38, because I'm trying to keep it even, I have to still multiply both sides by 14. So 14 over on the left side, though, needs to be distributed. So we are going to go ahead and do just like we did on that previous equation. I'm going to distribute the 14 to both the 2v minus 9 over 7 and then the 9v plus 2 over 2. So doing that one at a time, I'll go ahead and just rewrite down here in blue. If I did that first one, 14 times 2v minus 9 over 7, that's the first part of this side. What that means is 7 and 14 are both divisible by 7, so I'm going to do so. 7 divided by 7 is 1, 14 divided by 7 is 2. So now only the 2 needs to be distributed, and I no longer have a denominator. 2 times 2v would be 4v, and then 2 times 9, or negative 9, would be minus 18, or negative 18. So then what happens in this problem, we have to do the same thing. So that was this first part that we just did. Now we're going to then distribute the 14, oops, I need to move this, the 14 to the second part. So that is now, so again, remember it's plus, so it's 14 times 9v plus 2 over 2. And that 14 has to get distributed, but again, remember what happens is the 2 and the 14 are going to allow that 2 to cancel out, because 2 divided by 2 is 1, but then 14 has to be divided by 2 as well, and that makes it 7. So now the 7 gets distributed, so it's 7 times 9v, which is plus 63v, and then 7 times 2 would be then plus 14. And then over on the other side, we have 38 times 14. That has to be multiplied as well. And that would be 532. Okay, so let me just go ahead and clear all that jumbled mess that we have on the screen here, and let's just write what we have left. So right now we are left with, let me put my marker back up here, we have 4v minus 18. And then, that's an 8. Then we have plus 63v plus 14 is equal to 532. So remember, we need to, then at that point, we need to combine like terms. So over on the left side, we have a couple things that can be combined. We can combine 4v and then 63v. So the combination of those two would be 67v. And then we can combine the negative 18 and the positive 14, which would be negative 4, so we'll write that as minus 4. And then over on the other side, we just have the 532. So now we just need to go ahead and solve for v. So I'm going to go ahead and, as usual, we're going to go ahead and then add 4 to both sides, making sure that we keep it equal. That will cancel that out there, leaving me with 67v. And then over on the other side, 532 plus 4 gives me 536. And then we're going to divide both sides by 67, and that would give me v is equal to 8. So those are a couple of the ones that you would see on the homework. Now, let me give you an example of one that you would see on next week's quiz, so to make it a little bit easier for you. And I'll show you the two different ways that you could solve it as well. I wrote down an example because I wanted to give you a very precise example of what you would see. Okay, so if I had something like this, for instance, let's say I have 1/8 x plus 6 is equal to 3/4. This is very similar to one you would see on next week's quiz. I'll give it to you as where those fractions are kind of on their own. The variable isn't necessarily part of the fraction. That and the fraction can then just be turned into a decimal if that's an easier way to solve it. So I'll show you both ways. I'm going to show you first with the common denominator method. The common denominator out of 8 and 4 would be 8. So what that means is we have to multiply both sides of this equation by 8. And so Over here on the left, 8 needs to be distributed to the 1/8 x, and then since that's being added to 6, then it also needs to be distributed there to the 6. So in distributing that to the 1/8 x, what that does, since 8 and 8 are the same, they cancel out. That means 8 times x, I'm sorry, 1 times x would just be x, and so that's what we're left with here. Now, I know we canceled that out, that 8 and 8 out here just for time purposes there, but it's still 8 that's being distributed to the 6. So 8 times 6 is 48. So that's going to be then plus 48. And then doing the same thing here on the other side, so that's going to be equal to, and then 8 times 3/4, the 4 and the 8, the 4 needs to be able to cancel out because 4 divided by 4 would be 1, 8 divided by 4 would be 2, so now it's a 2 that gets distributed here, so 2 times 3 is 6. So then what happens is we need to just solve for x by subtracting 48 from both sides, and that will leave me with x is equal to negative 42, and that is our answer. The other way that I showed you in class and how you could take this exact same equation and solve it would be to just turn those fractions into decimals if that's easier. So here's our original problem again. So if I turn the fractions into decimals, 1 divided by 8, remember that's how we turn fractions into decimals, is look at this line as if it says divide. So 1 divided by 8 would be 0.125, so we can look at that as 0.125x plus 6 is equal to, and then we do the same thing with the 3/4, 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. So now we just can do the same thing to get x by itself. Remember, here's our x, so we want to get that by itself, so we need to do, as we usually do, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 6 from both sides. That's going to leave me with, canceling out those 6's, and leave me with 0.125x is equal to negative 5.25. And then to solve for x, to get x completely by itself, since x is being multiplied by 0.125, I'm going to divide it. And then that cancels that out, and it leaves me with x, exactly what I want, and negative 5.25 divided by 0.125 would also give me negative 42. So that's a closer representation of what you would see on the quiz. Don't stress too much about those homework questions, but I hope at least that helps you to see how those would be solved. If you have any other questions, let me know.